A silent man in a worn jacket stands at the back of the graduation hall. He was asked to leave the hall. No one knew that he was a veteran, a man who once risked his life to save comrades on the battlefield in Iraq. No one cared about the story behind his eyes, a story nearly forgotten, like thousands of other veteran stories that were never told. But today, 6 SEALs seated in the crowd quietly stood up. And in that very graduation, justice for veterans was no longer a slogan. It began with an action. The graduation began under soft sunlight. Applause echoed through the hall. Parents, friends, loved ones, beaming, phones, and bouquets in hand, ready to capture one of life's biggest moments. In the back, unnoticed, stood a man alone. No flowers, no camera, just a worn-out military jacket, and eyes fixed on the stage, where his son's name would soon be called. His name was Walter Harris, retired Marine Sergeant, served 22 years, partially deaf from an IED blast, survived 3 deadly missions, but today, he wasn't fighting. Today, he just wanted to be a father, watching his son graduate. That's all. A staff member in a black suit approached, list in hand, scanning Walter head to toe. "Sorry, sir. This area is reserved for VIP guests. Do you have an invitation?" Walter nodded and quietly replied, "I'm the father of Ethan Harris." The staffer scanned the list, frowned. "Your name's not here. I'm afraid you can't stand here." A pause. Walter looked around. No one looked back. He didn't protest, didn't argue, just bowed his head and stepped back into a shadowed corner near the emergency exit. A father asked to leave the most important day of his son's life just because he didn't look the part. But he didn't know someone had been watching him closely. Walter stood against the wall. Beside him, a chipped fire extinguisher and a crackling speaker. He didn't sit down, though his legs trembled from last year's surgery. His eyes never left the stage. Up there, the host, Mr. Caldwell, was speaking. "We thank our registered, proper guests and proud parents." A few chuckles scattered through the room. Walter heard it, but he remained still. No anger, no reaction. He was used to being misunderstood, used to judgmental stares and cruel silence. But 6 men in row 5 didn't laugh. They watched Walter for a long time, said nothing, just exchanged glances and clasped hands. The ceremony went on. Names were read aloud, followed by applause. But at the far corner of the hall, Walter still stood, one hand clutching an old, battered military cap. A few people passed by, glanced, then looked away. One woman clutched her purse tighter, as if he were a threat. A student muttered, "How do people like that even get in here?" Walter heard it, but didn't respond. He'd endured shellfire and flames. Words like that didn't hurt anymore. They just made him tired. But the 6 men, they weren't just watching now. One leaned in and whispered something. The next nodded. They each placed a hand over their heart, right where a SEAL badge once rested. In the 5th row, no one noticed. 6 men sat upright, hands on their knees. No uniforms, no medals, just ordinary men, like anyone else in the crowd. But their eyes weren't ordinary. Cold, focused, clear. They looked at Walter the way soldiers look at a former commander. No words needed, they understood. The 3rd man, graying hair, nodded slightly, a silent order. All 6 reached into their coat pockets. A small, round, metal object caught the stage light. SEAL badges, one by one, now resting in open palms. And still, Walter hadn't turned. He didn't know. An earthquake was about to erupt behind him. Heavy footsteps echoed down the aisle. A security guard approached, no longer polite. "You need to come outside and verify your identity. This is your final warning." Walter didn't respond. He simply looked toward the stage, where his son's name was nearing. His hand trembled slightly, but his eyes stayed firm. Then, from the 5th row, one man stood, Everyone turned. Tension swept through the hall like static. He walked forward, raising a small object. A shining SEAL badge under the lights. He spoke, voice deep and resolute. "This man isn't going anywhere. He's the one who pulled us out of hell." And like a silent command, the other 5 rose. 6 silent warriors, thunder without sound. The hall froze, like the air had vanished. The hall was packed, yet silent. The guards stiffened, stepped back. 6 SEAL badges gleamed in the light, speaking louder than any words. From the back row, an elderly man with a cane rose, wrinkled face, raspy voice, but every word sharp as command. His name is Sergeant Walter Harris. In 2004, during Operation Fallujah, I was badly wounded under enemy fire. No one dared come back for me except him. The hall held its breath. All eyes turned to Walter, the man who had just been told to leave. But now, he stood like a hero returning from another time. No more words were needed. No one asked if he had an invitation. They just stood in silence. While the hall was still stunned, a name rang out on stage. Ethan James Harris. Applause erupted but quickly faded, because Ethan didn't step forward to receive his diploma. From backstage, he removed his graduation cap and walked into the crowd. His face tense, eyes red. He headed straight to Walter, his father, now the center of hundreds of stares. Ethan stopped, looked straight at the organizers, and spoke loud and clear. "If this man isn't allowed to be here, then I don't want that diploma either." No one moved. Ethan removed his gown, dropped to his knees, and hugged his father tightly. In that moment, no one saw an old jacket. No one asked who he was. They just saw a father and a son, holding each other among hundreds of strangers, bound by a love that needed no explanation. No one spoke, but something had shifted. It was as if the entire room exhaled, after a wave of collective shame. A young student who'd mocked Walter earlier bowed his head. A mother wiped away tears. The first clap came, soft, hesitant, but soon spread like fire. Row 3 stood, then 4, then 5. The entire hall rose, as if offering an apology through their presence. On stage, Principal Sanders stepped forward. He didn't look at Ethan, but at Walter, locking eyes in a long, powerful silence. Then he said, his voice low and steady, no microphone needed, "Today, we've learned something. Some people don't need an invitation because they belong wherever they choose to stand." He bowed deeply to Walter and motioned toward the front row. Walter stood still. For a moment, he couldn't believe what he'd heard. The spotlight hit him, but this time, it didn't burn. It felt gentler, like light welcoming a soldier home. He walked slowly, savoring every step. No one spoke, but every eye followed him. No more suspicion, only respect. The 6 SEALs stood in formation as he passed. No salute, no back pats, just hands placed over their hearts. Walter nodded slightly, didn't smile, didn't speak. Ethan walked beside him, like an honorary escort. Together, they sat in the first row, the row reserved for the important. And for the first time in that ceremony, everyone realized honor doesn't come with an invitation. It comes from a life lived in silent, relentless sacrifice. The ceremony resumed, but nothing felt the same. Names were still called, but eyes kept drifting to the front row, where Walter Harris sat beside his son. One student walked off the stage, then veered off course, reached out a hand. "Thank you for your service, Sergeant." Then another, and another. A line of students, pausing to shake his hand before returning to their seats. No one instructed them. No cue cards, just a ripple of gratitude, like sunlight touching a long-shadowed corner. A young mother stepped forward, child in arms. She leaned down and whispered, "Thank you for teaching your son how to stand up when it matters." Walter only smiled. Not much, but enough for her to know. He heard, and he valued it. As the ceremony neared its end, one of the SEALs stepped forward. No spotlight, no music cue. He stopped before Walter, his hand extended, not for a handshake, but to offer something small. A challenge coin, brass, etched with their unit insignia. He spoke, voice low but heavy like a beating drum. We used to think no one could outlast you, and to this day, no one has. Walter looked at the coin in his palm. His finger traced the edge gently, a subtle movement, but it was clear. His hand was trembling. It had been a long time since he'd been honored like this. No bugles, no medals, no announcements, just a coin and the silence of brothers who'd lived through fire. And then, Walter smiled. For the first time that day, not because of the applause, but because, finally, he was seen for who he truly was. That day, Walter asked for nothing. He didn't seek recognition, didn't demand apology. He just wanted to stand and see his son cross the stage. But that quiet presence changed hundreds of people. One kind look, one person standing up at the right moment, one silent, brave act. Sometimes you don't need to bang the table or shout loud, just someone with enough courage not to look away. A man's worth isn't in his appearance. Not everyone who's silent hasn't suffered, and some fathers spend their whole lives waiting to be called just one simple word: proud. Not everyone who carried a rifle returns to stand in the light. Some come home with wounds no one can see. Some live quietly, without medals, without applause. But men like Walter are why we must remember. Not with trophies, but with living respect. This isn't just the story of one father. It's a reminder that we, society, must not stay silent when those who stood for us are pushed aside. If you believe sacrifice deserves recognition, if you believe silence shouldn't be the final chapter, comment "Justice for Veterans," and please share this story so the world knows. Justice for veterans doesn't come from a system. It starts with how we choose to see them.